The moment I realized my life had quietly fallen apart wasn't during an argument or a goodbye. It was when I sat alone in a chair, holding a book I couldn't focus on, and felt my chest tighten for no clear reason. Intro. Plus. Act. It wasn't always like this. At the beginning, even when things weren't perfect, we were good together. It wasn't always rosy, but we got along. We laughed in the kitchen late at night, shared stupid inside jokes, planned small trips we never fully took. We built something that felt steady, at least from the outside. We lived in a quiet part of a mid-sized city in the UK, nothing fancy. A simple apartment, neutral walls, a couch that had started to sag in the middle. It felt like a normal life, a safe life. I used to believe that was enough. Most mornings I woke up before my alarm. I'd lie there for a few seconds, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathing beside me. I liked those moments. They felt calm, predictable. I told myself that comfort meant stability, and stability meant love. But slowly, without any clear moment I could point to, something shifted. I started noticing how quiet the apartment felt, even when we were both home. Not an angry silence, just empty. I'd talk about my day, while standing in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, phone in my hand, and she'd nod without really looking at me. Her eyes would stay fixed somewhere past my shoulder. I didn't push. I rarely did. I thought giving space was respectful. I thought patience was maturity. Over time, my body reacted before my mind caught up. My shoulders stayed tense for no reason. I caught myself clenching my jaw while sitting on the couch. Sometimes my breath felt shallow, like I couldn't quite get a full inhale. I'd shift positions, pull at the sleeves of my hoodie, anything to shake the feeling. We stopped, touching in small ways. No casual hand on the back when passing each other. No leaning into each other on the couch. When I tried, even gently, her body would stiffen just slightly, barely noticeable, but I noticed. At night, I'd lie awake longer. My legs felt heavy. My arms rested on my chest like they didn't belong to me. I stared at the dark, listening to the hum of the city outside the window, counting lights from passing cars just to keep my thoughts quiet. I told myself this was normal, that long relationships change, that love becomes quieter. I repeated those ideas like rules I wasn't allowed to break, but the truth was simpler and harder to admit. I was shrinking, not physically, not yet, but internally. I stopped bringing up things that bothered me, stopped asking questions I didn't want to hear answers to. I adjusted my tone, my timing, my expectations. Slowly, my days became smaller. The conversation that ended everything didn't feel dramatic. The apartment was unusually clean that afternoon, like she had prepared the space for something important. The light coming through the window was pale and cold. I remember sitting at the table, my hands flat against the wood, feeling how cool it was under my palms. She told me she didn't feel the same anymore, that she'd tried, that it wasn't my fault. My mouth felt dry. My ears rang. I nodded because it felt like the right response, even though I wasn't sure what she'd just said fully reached me. My chest tightened so much I had to remind myself to breathe. That night, the bed felt enormous. I kept waking up, turning slightly, reaching out without thinking. Each time my hand touched nothing, a dull ache spread through my arms and shoulders. By morning, my body felt like it hadn't rested at all. Days passed. I kept working, kept moving. From the outside, nothing changed. Inside, everything felt heavier. One evening, after work, I sat alone in the living room. The lamp cast a warm circle of light on the floor. I lowered myself into the chair because standing suddenly felt like too much effort. I picked up a book from the table and opened it, but the words wouldn't settle. My hands were steady, but my chest felt tight, since my breathing was shallow. I stared at the page without reading a single line. On the floor in front of me, the bathroom scale caught my eye. Black, flat, ordinary. I don't remember putting it there. It felt symbolic somehow. like it was waiting for me to notice something I'd been avoiding. I leaned forward, slightly, elbows on my knees, book still open in my hands, the fabric of my sweatpants bunched under my fingers as I gripped it without realizing. My body felt tired in a way sleep didn't fix. That was the first time the thought formed clearly in my head. I wasn't just losing a relationship, I was losing myself, and I didn't know how long I'd been disappearing. After that night, time stopped behaving normally. Days moved forward, but I stayed behind. I kept the same routine. Alarm, shower, coffee, keys in my pocket. I'd catch my reflection in the bathroom mirror while brushing my teeth and pause for a second too long, foam dripping into the sink, trying to recognize the man staring back. He looked fine, a little tired. Nothing dramatic. That almost made it worse. At work, my body was there, but my attention kept slipping. I'd reread the same sentence on my screen over and over. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, stiff, like they'd forgotten what they were supposed to do. Sometimes I noticed my foot bouncing under the desk, a nervous rhythm I couldn't stop. Then people asked how I was doing. I said, "I'm okay." The words felt hollow, like I'd borrowed them from someone else. Evenings were the hardest. The apartment sounded louder without her. Every small noise stood out, the fridge clicking on, the floor creaking when I shifted my weight, cars passing outside the window. I'd walk from room to room without any clear reason, phone in my hand, opening apps and closing them again, waiting for something to happen. I replayed moments from the relationship, but not the big ones, not arguments. It was the small scenes that kept looping, her turning away slightly when I sat down next to her, the way she answered questions with fewer words, the pause before she said my name, like she had to remind herself who she was talking to. My chest felt tight most of the time, not painful, just compressed, like there wasn't enough room inside me. I caught myself holding my breath without noticing, then exhaling slowly when I realized it. My shoulders stayed raised, even when I tried to relax them. Sleep didn't help. I woke up early every morning, staring at the ceiling while the city outside slowly brightened. My limbs felt heavy, like they were filled with sand. I lay there until I couldn't stand it anymore, then sat up on the edge of the bed, elbows resting on my thighs, head down. One morning, I stood in the kitchen holding a mug of coffee I'd already forgotten to drink. The heat seeped into my palm, almost uncomfortable. On the counter, my keys sat exactly where I'd left them the night before. Everything was in its place, too much in its place. That's when the fear crept in. Not fear of being alone, fear of staying like this. I realized I hadn't felt truly present in my body for a long time. I existed mostly in my head, replaying, analyzing, adjusting. My body was just something that carried me from one quiet room to another. I started noticing my posture, how I sat slouched, how I avoided taking up space. Even when walking down the street, I kept my arms close to my sides, eyes down, like I didn't want to be seen too clearly. One evening, while walking home from work, I passed a small gym I'd walked by hundreds of times before. Bright lights, big windows. Inside, people moved with purpose, running, lifting, sweating, breathing hard, fully there. I slowed down, without meaning to. My chest tightened again, but this time it felt different, sharper, more alert. I stood there for a moment, hands in my pockets, feeling ridiculous. I told myself I didn't belong in places like that everyone inside would somehow know why I was there, that they'd see straight through me. I walked away, but the image stayed with me. That night, I lay on the couch instead of the bed, legs stretched out, staring at the ceiling. My phone rested on my chest, rising and falling with my breathing. I imagined what it would feel like to be exhausted for a clear reason, to feel muscle burn instead of this constant internal pressure. The next day, The thought followed me everywhere. On the train, at my desk, in the shower. With water running down my back, I pictured my hands gripping something solid. Weight. Resistance. Something that pushed back. A few days later, after work, I found myself standing in front of that same gym again. It was darker outside this time. The city lights reflected in the glass. My reflection stared back at me, slightly distorted, shoulders tense, jaw tight. My hands were shaking a little as I reached for the door handle. Not panic, anticipation. Like I was standing at the edge of something and didn't know what was on the other side. Inside, the air smelled like rubber mats and metal. Music pulsed low in the background. The sound of weights clanking echoed through the room. I felt exposed, suddenly aware of my posture, my breathing, the way my clothes fit. I signed up quickly, barely listening to the words being said to me. My mouth felt dry. I nodded when I was supposed to nod. Smiled when it felt expected. When I finally stepped onto the gym floor, I didn't know what to do with my hands. I pretended to stretch, eyes fixed on the ground, heart beating faster than it should have been. I picked up a dumbbell. Just one. It felt heavier than I expected. Cold, solid, real. I wrapped my fingers around it and squeezed. For the first time in weeks, my thoughts stopped spiraling, not because I felt strong, but because I felt present. My arms started to shake after a few repetitions. My breath grew louder. Heat spread through my muscles. Sweat gathered at the back of my neck. The discomfort was immediate and honest. And in that moment, standing there under harsh lights with my body working hard, I realized something quietly terrifying. This pain made sense. I kept coming back, not because I suddenly loved the gym, and not because I had some dramatic burst of motivation. I came back because for 1 hour a day, my mind stopped eating itself. The first weeks were awkward. I moved, slowly. I second-guessed everything. I wiped my hands on my sweatpants. More than necessary. My grip slipped sometimes because my palms were damp. My breathing was loud and uneven, and I was painfully aware of it. Still, I showed up. At night, my body ached in new places. My forearms felt tight when I tried to open jars. My legs trembled slightly when I stood up from the chair. The soreness was inconvenient, but it was honest. When I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts didn't spiral as far. They hit a wall of physical fatigue and softened. One evening, after a long session on the treadmill, I came home and dropped my shoes by the door without lining them up. I noticed it later and didn't care. I stood in the kitchen, shirt clinging to my back, sweat cooling against my skin, and drank a full glass of water without checking my phone once. That felt new. Slowly, other things shifted. I sat up straighter without thinking about it. My shoulders relaxed. My breathing deepened. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I still saw tired eyes, but they felt more alert, more present. The scale stayed on the floor in the living room. Some mornings I stepped on it. Some mornings I didn't. The number mattered less than the ritual. Standing there barefoot, feeling the cold surface under my feet, grounding myself in the moment. There were bad days. Days when the sadness came back heavy and unannounced. Days when I sat in the chair again, book in my hands, fingers resting on the cover, not reading. On those days, I didn't pretend the pain was gone. I let it sit with me. Then I got up anyway. The real turning point wasn't physical. It happened quietly. One night, while I was running on the treadmill, staring at my reflection in the dark window, city lights blurred behind me. My breath was steady. My arms swung naturally at my sides. I realized I wasn't trying to become someone else. I was rebuilding the version of me I'd slowly abandoned. I stopped replaying conversations I couldn't change. I stopped wondering what I could have done differently. Not because I had answers, but because my body finally felt like a place I could live in again. Weeks passed. Then, months. I still missed her sometimes. Certain smells, certain songs. But The memories didn't crush my chest anymore. They came and went like weather. I could feel them without drowning. One night, I sat in the chair again, the same one where everything had first felt unbearable. The lamp cast its familiar warm light. The book rested open in my hands. This time, the words stayed with me. I turned a page without forcing it. On the floor, the scale was still there. Ordinary, quiet, no judgment. I leaned back slightly, exhaled, and noticed something simple and important. I felt solid, not happy all the time, not fixed, just here, in my body, in my life. Taking up space again. Losing the relationship hurt. It stripped me down in ways I didn't expect, but it also showed me how much of myself I'd given away without realizing it. I didn't rebuild my life out of anger or revenge. I rebuilt it out of necessity, because staying broken had finally become more frightening than change. And if there's one thing I know now, it's this. I didn't find myself in the gym. I found myself in the decision to keep showing up.